All right, welcome everyone. We'll give people a minute or two to enter the room and then we'll start. And thank you very much for showing up at the very last GNF session of the conference. This is not the easiest time, but I really appreciate you all being here. We'll start in a minute. All right, I guess we can start now. So again, thank you very much for joining us on the very last Global Networking Forum panel of the conference. But as I am expected to say, the most important one, because this is something that we haven't seen a lot at conferences like this. And of course, I'm exaggerating, but this is one of the very rare occasions, I wouldn't say the first, because the first happened a few months ago, but very rare occasions within IAF conferences where the space media is actually sitting on stage. We're all used to the media sitting in the back of the room or in some dark corner, invisible to most, trying to catch the headlines. But today I'm really, really proud, and I would like to thank the IAF for giving us this opportunity to put the media on stage and try to build a relationship between the media and the rest of the industry. So once again, thank you very much for being here, and thank you very much to my panelists for being here, who I will introduce in a second. But just to give you a little bit of background as to why I think this is so important. Space is a topic of public interest, and broad public support for space activities is the foundation for creating political commitment. However, in the past, space institutions and advocacy bodies have not always been able to effectively convey the benefits that space activities bring to society. Media plays a key role in communicating highly complex and technical subjects to a broad public in an understandable way, and as such is the link between the scientific community and society. In 2021, and we saw it this morning when Chris Boshausen was on stage here, we're seeing important new developments in space, including new tourist and non-professional flights into space, new large satellite constellations, questions raised about the sustainability of space, including space debris, challenges around ownership and exploitation of space resources, and the role of space in monitoring and finding solutions against climate change. We also see new actors in human spaceflight, including commercial organizations and a fast-growing presence of China and hopefully soon India. And again, we have seen that here at the conference right now. So I'm very pleased to speak about the evolving role of media in the space sector with my very distinguished panel here. My name is Remco Timmermans. I am the owner of SpaceSite OU, a small but specialized online marketing agency dedicating my work to space. And I am the voice behind many social media accounts in the industry, invisible to many. And I guess that kind of exemplifies how the media works. Invisible, yet playing a very, very important role. Anyway, without further ado, I will allow my panel to introduce themselves. So if each of you could please shortly introduce yourself and briefly describe the position of your news channel in bringing space news to the audiences. How do you see your role as a journalist or reporter in setting the tone about space news? Jeff, can I start with you?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jeff Faust. I'm a senior staff writer at Space News. First of all, I want to thank all of you for showing up here late in the conference. I know there's a lot of other things going on, and I'm glad you're here. I will say this is the first time I've had a panel where the opening act earlier this morning was Martha Stewart. So always a great first for something like that. Space News is a publication devoted primarily to the business and politics of space. We're based in the United States, so most of our coverage is based in the US, but certainly we cover a lot of what's going on elsewhere in the world, including Europe, Russia, China, and a lot of the emerging space countries as well. I've been at Space News for about 7 years. My area of focus is on civil and commercial space, so NASA is really the foundation of a lot of my reporting, but I also cover a lot of what's going on, particularly in the emerging commercial sphere, whether it's SpaceX or Virgin Galactic, Blue Origin, a lot of the startups going on. So it's sort of a mix of business and policy and technology going on. And we really serve sort of an audience of people who are either working in the industry or directly interface with the industry, as opposed to, say, maybe a broader public audience.
All right, thank you, Jeff. Stacy?
Hello, everyone. My name is Stacy, or Anastasia is on my placard. First of all, Remco, thank you for this panel. Thank you to the IAF for allowing us to speak, and thank you guys for being here with us. My first question is, as a space journalist, can I have a show of hands who is a space journalist or a communication specialist in the room right now? Yeah, you see that most of the journalists are here, so this makes us relate to each other. Thank you so much for being here. I'm a space journalist. I produce a lot of space content. I am active on Instagram as well, and I try to bring space to the people, because one of our main values right now is explaining to the public sector how we can make space more approachable, right? Jeff has been mentioning some of the bigger policy forces, but I think Remco and I are working more with the grounds up, because that's really important right now, because there are you guys who are very good with telling the news, and we're trying to make people hear the news. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Sarvat?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here, and great to have a media panel at the IAC. My name is Sarvat Nasser, and I'm a senior reporter for The National who covers space news. My main focus is the UE space program. The National is headquartered in Abu Dhabi, but we have bureaus in London, Washington, D.C., Saudi Arabia, and we're just going through a global expansion right now. We've increased our focus in space, and we have journalists in all of our bureaus who are covering space, and we are putting a major focus on covering the UE space program. I've been covering the UE space since 2014, even before the UE Space Agency was formed and when the Mars program was announced. So it's been quite a ride, and here I am now. Thank you.
All right, thank you for being here. Timidayo?
Thank you very much, Remco. My name is Timidayo Nyoshi. I'm the founder and managing director for Space in Africa. Space in Africa is a media and analytics company focusing on the African space and satellite industry. We started in 2018. We're headquartered in Lagos, Nigeria, with an international office in Estonia and Europe. We pretty much cover everything in the African space and satellite industry, what's going on in all of the countries, whether it is business, politics, investment, everything that is actually going on the continent. And aside from that, we also do like a lot of business and market analysis, looking at different segments of the industry. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Before we proceed, I would like to invite all of you to ask your questions on Slido. As you should know by now, go to slido.com and use IAC 2021 as your code, which is, by the way, also the hashtag that we're using for this event. So if you haven't until today, well, it's a bit late, but still, please, if you are posting about this or other things on social media, please use hashtag IAC 2021 so the world will see what's going on here. And I think it's important for the world to see what's going on here. So with that said, I will go to the first questions. We'll go through a few rounds of questions, and hopefully at the end of the session, we'll have some opportunity to go through your questions. But let me ask the first question, and we'll go through you in the order that you're sitting here, if that's okay. That's probably the easiest. The way space activities have been communicated and promoted to the non-space community and the general public has changed and evolved over the past 60 years. In those same 60 years, public opinion has changed and evolved too, from global excitement in the 1960s to much less interest, and even an anti-space attitude sometimes nowadays. So what do you think is the role of the media in influencing this public attitude towards space activities? Jeff?
Yeah, I'll maybe push back a little slightly on the title there about promoting. Promoting sort of has a connotation of advocacy, and as a journalist, you're typically not an advocate. You are providing the facts, you're providing the context behind the facts, you're putting, providing the details to help people make decisions. But promotion is something that's usually left to companies, to organizations, even the IAF and so on. So when I'm reporting, I'm not thinking about promoting space or promoting a particular point of view. I'm reporting on what is going on. A launch, a space-related bill going through Congress, anything else along those lines, and let people use that information to shape their opinions accordingly on whether they're for or against the bill, or whether they think this is a good policy, things like that. So I'm not really sort of in the business of promotion. Just sort of in terms of the general trends that you're talking about. I think there's a little bit of a myth in the space community that back in the days of Apollo, everyone was pro-space, and we only more recently have seen this anti-space movement, if you will, and that's not really the case. If you go back and you look, Roger Launius, spaceflight historian, former NASA chief historian, went back and looked at some of the opinion polls from the 1960s in the U.S. and found that the only time that the majority of the American public said they supported Apollo was right after Apollo 11. So great time to hop on the bandwagon. And certainly we saw a lot of public opposition in terms of priorities for spending back in the 1960s, much as we see arguments now in the early 2020s about spending on space versus spending on social issues or climate change or so on. So I don't think that's necessarily a new issue, but I think it's important when we report on that to put that into a context and help explain what is being spent, why it's being spent, and the benefits and drawbacks of doing so. So as journalists, I'm not promoting a particular point of view. I'm not saying whether a bill is a good or bad bill or companies are good or bad company, simply reporting what is going on so that people can make informed decisions about these issues.
All right, well, thank you for busting some of these industry myths, and I think we see you doing your job right here on stage, so thank you for that, Jeff. Stacy.
I really enjoyed your point of view, Jeff, because I have a slightly different one, and it feels good to see that there are people with other opinions, because to me, space are humans. To me, space is about the people who are behind space, behind the robots, behind the crafts. It's about astronauts, and not just astronauts, because there are so many other specialists in space, including journalists. And I think the best thing that we can do right now to make the public more aware of what we do is give a face to whoever is out there working for all those rockets to launch, to help all the kids get scientific education, because that's also part of popularizing space and communicating space. So to me, the best thing now is to look at all of you in the audience and know about your stories, and then show the world how awesome they are, because you've all made a lot of effort to get here, and I think that's really inspiring, and that's the best type of journalism I want to do. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. It's good to see different perspectives, and you also see that the people here on stage come from slightly different backgrounds, and I think that shows some of the variety that is hidden under the word media. The media consists of different functions and different roles, and it's really good to see those different roles represented here. So, Sarwat, please.
Yeah, I just want to add on to what Jeff said. When I also saw that word promoting space activities, I thought I'm definitely not advocating for space. I'm a journalist who's going to report facts, and then you can do what you want with that information. As for the role of media in space activities, when I first started reporting on space here, well, first of all, there were no space reporters, so there was nobody who was giving information as to what was going on behind the scenes in the UAE Space Agency and the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center. So eventually, I and my news organization realized that we had to start reporting on that more, and we sort of tried building that relationship with the Space Center here and the UAE Space Agency. And we started reporting on it more and more. And I think that's incredibly important for, I would call this an established space nation, emerging space nations who are expanding their space programs. The reporters in those areas especially need to maybe build connections with their national space agencies to continue those efforts. And we can see here now that there's been sort of, I think now you can see space reporters rising here, especially from other news organizations as well. It was good to see reporters from other news companies that are UE-based coming to IAC and to cover the events that are happening here. So it's important that as more countries make their space programs, like they expand their space programs, reporters and news organizations are actually covering what's going on, just like any other beats that are being covered by other reporters as well and shouldn't be ignored.
All right, thank you very much. So let's see if you have a different opinion about this, Timidayo. And I understand you want to show some slides, so can we have the slides, please?
Okay. So I think there's a difference between promoting, advocating, and reporting, and sometimes you can do something that is actually combining like the three together. Like for example, for Jeff, merely reporting what is going on is also like a way of promoting it. It's a way of driving the conversation, and oftentimes some of these things come together. For us in Space in Africa, it's almost a combination of all of this. Before 2018, there was a lot of activities going on in the African space and satellite industry, but people were not talking about it. Platforms like Space News, like Space.com, like Via Satellite, they write occasionally about the industry, but specifically about maybe a launch or a deal. And so you go to like countries in Africa that actually have space program, and people don't even know anything about that. And then you go to Europe, you go to America, and you talk about space programs in Africa, and nobody knows what you're talking about. So when we came in, we sort of like bridged that gap, and we just did like a couple of analyses, and I want to share some data with us. So we tried to, so we retrieved some data from Google on like news stories about space programs in Africa. And we retrieved about over 5,000 articles from over 700 sources, and for the last 20 years, basically. And this is like the result. So you can see the tipping point in like 2018 when we came on board, like, the graph is going up because now we're reporting a lot of things going on in the industry, writing a lot of stories, a lot of interviews, covering, space programs in countries that some of you guys have probably never heard of. And there is like a correlation between this and the growth in the industry, because now there is more awareness, people know what's going on in like other countries, and then you see interest in other countries trying to like develop space program. So, the role of media, it's a lot of work. And at the same time, when we do industry analysis, people see data about the industry. In 2019, we released a report, which was like the first report analyzing how much the industry was worth. How much revenue is coming from the industry, and that was like the first report on that, and that sort of like drive the growth in the industry, because now people know there's actually money flowing around in the industry, and that has sort of like accelerated the growth in what is going on the continent. I'll stop here.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. So you've seen different perspectives on how the media thinks about playing their role in influencing public attitude. And I think we will continue to discuss that a little bit. And we see some questions on popping up, and don't show it yet, we'll get to your questions later. But I do see some questions popping up here that I'm going to go through right now. So thank you for these questions, and it tells me that we're aligned in how we think about this. So let me go to the second question to my panel here. There's a lot of hype around certain missions, especially the highly marketed new commercial suborbital and orbital missions, claiming to make space more accessible to everyone. At the same time, it seems a lot more difficult to sell the actual benefits of space to all, like scientific research, improved GNSS, and Earth observation for things like climate change, to an increasingly critical audience. So how can journalists help bring a supportive, complete, balanced, and unbiased view of all activities in space without losing its role, as we have heard here, as a critical observer? Jeff?
Yeah, I agree. There are a lot of high-profile companies and programs that maybe get outsized share of attention, although I think there is public interest, if not in the missions themselves and in the people behind them. I'm thinking, for example, the summer with Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin's dueling suborbital space flights with Branson and Bezos on board. Relatively small in the grander scheme of things in the space industry, but attracted a lot of public attention because of the personal competition between the two. And there was a ton of media attention, and people were watching that. So people were interested in that, even if people will say, well, it's not that important enough they watched it. But to get to the issue of, why don't these other things get more attention? And I call it sort of the infrastructure problem, is that space has become critical infrastructure in terms of navigation, communications, weather forecasting, and so on. But infrastructure doesn't get a lot of attention unless it breaks down. You don't think about the process of how electrical power gets to your home until there's a power outage. You don't think about the air traffic management system that keeps thousands of aircraft in the air at one time until there's a breakdown that grounds flights and causes lots of delays. You only tend to think about infrastructure when it doesn't work. When it works, it's sort of out of sight, out of mind. And I think that's true for a lot of space capabilities. And in fact, that's sort of a sign of success of space, is that it has become so good and so essential that we don't think about it except when it doesn't work. And from the news standpoint, there isn't a news story in weather satellites don't break down, continue to forecast weather. The story is when weather satellite breaks down, weather forecasts are jeopardized. That's sort of the issue that we face in trying to tell that. So you sort of have to look at sort of what's going on at the cutting edge, and I think some of the areas like climate change research and so on. At NASA, they're doing this Earth Science Earth System Observatory program with a series of high-profile missions over the next decade to study climate change, and so that's going to be news and that's going to be interesting. But the fact that there are dozens of other satellites in orbit right now providing data is only interesting when they aren't working. And so that's sort of the bit of conundrum that we face in sort of trying to address those issues.
All right, thank you. And you triggered me to think about this morning. I mean, you talked about Martha Stewart. She was clearly the VIP in the room to talk about space food. But one thing she said was kind of important from an outreach and maybe from a news point of view. She saw William Shatner launch on Blue Origin a few weeks ago. And she said, hey, if William Shatner can do this, then I can. And that's sort of a message that, yes, we may think about these billionaire missions, whatever we want, but apparently it does something. So I found that remarkable this morning. I don't know if anyone else noticed, but anyway, just as a side note. Stacey, let me go to you to answer this question.
Thank you so much, and this is my favorite topic, because if we listened closely to Jeff and Remco, there was one key word that you both used, that's people. We're talking too much about technology, and we're not recognizing how important people are, right? Because Martha Stewart came, no one expected her to be here ever, and then she made an impact, right, on all of us. And I think that's the point that we are losing a lot of the time, that we're running after technology and news in technology and whether something fails or works, but honestly what matters is the human behind it. Why? Let's talk about Apple. Apple and Steve Jobs. No one cared about phones. They would just buy phones, whichever phone was working, and then, their Nokia 3310 never broke, so they never knew they needed a new iPhone every year. But then we got Steve Jobs, and he was like, you need a new phone. And everyone's like, oh my God, I need a new phone. So whenever we see a new billionaire come into space, it's like, oh my God, Richard Branson is in space. Oh, there's space. Oh, he's there? Okay, let's follow Richard Branson. Or then we saw the guy from Star Trek go to space. Oh my God, how did that happen? So all of the stories that we're talking about this year, they're mostly about humans. So what does that mean? It means that we need to follow humans. And guys, the message can't be stronger. Look at the news. What are you gonna see in the title line? Most of the time it's someone doing something, and that's cool, and let's read about it because we care about that someone. And as long as we think about space as technology and a technological process, we're not really getting there anywhere far, because people right now are following influencers and following lives of people. And as long as we are thinking that there is a satellite which is doing something and people won't understand, no one will understand it because you're not trying to make them interested in it. When you tell a child, imagine meeting a child somewhere, and they're like, what do? I do space. Who needs space? I'm like, do you have a phone? Yeah, give me your phone. I'm going to delete the GPS off your phone. No. I'm like, well, we don't need space. So let me just delete that from your phone. He's like, I do. I'm like, you see? You didn't know it, but you do. So when you come to everyone and you tell them, hey guys, look, this is how you use space, everyone gets immediately more excited. The things that they don't understand, it's not because they don't know, but it's just because they've never been told. So why can't we tell the story? And again, people, guys, it's all in us. Our stories are awesome. Thanks.
So hang on, before we move on, if that's okay, let me challenge you on this, because we have many deep space missions. Luckily, there's no one on board of Voyager, as far as we know, but there are many exciting missions, and some of them actually do make headlines and do make it to the news, like Voyager, when there's something going on. And I do see very smart marketeers working at these organizations trying to give these missions a face. Is that related to the same thing? That if, okay, it's a robot, but how do you communicate the story of a robot flying millions of miles into space? By giving it a personality? Is that how that works?
Yes, of course. Let's talk about UAE since we're here. The Hope mission, her name is Amal. She's a girl and she goes to space. And there is a book about her in the exhibition hall. And I was reading that book to my friend's 5-year-old yesterday. She was so excited. She saw a rocket and she yelled, Burj Khalifa. I'm like, no, that's a rocket. But she already got the notion. Let's think about curiosity. Curiosity is something that humans possess, right? And remember when she was singing happy birthday to herself? It was in the news because we were trying to give her a human presence. She's alone on Mars and we need to support her, so she's gonna sing. I mean, I had tears in my eyes when I read that story. Maybe some of you did too. But every piece of technology is just a piece of technology until you put a person into it. Because Sputnik was a big deal in 1957, but then Yuri Gagarin went to space. Human. Then Apollo, important, but then when the guys went, it's a whole different story. So we just need to angle, okay, we can't use the word angle as journalists, right? But we can try to make a story a human story, and we can try to not just give a life to technology, but we can give sense and meaning to technology and to missions. And this is what we've seen recently, and it's been a success.
Yeah, and let's not mention Laika. Sarvat, please.
Well, I can speak about it from perspective from the Middle East audience. Space tourism definitely is doing, I think it's doing well in grabbing the attention of the audience here. This past week, I think one of our most read stories on our website was the fact that Blue Origin is looking to, eyeing the UAE for opening up spaceports here for space tourism flights. And it's interesting to see that, that's one of the stories that's being read so much. The flight that happened with the William Shatner was being read a lot. And all of the space tourism flights, those stories do well. So they're definitely grabbing a lot of attention. But that's not to say that other stories don't do well. Here, what I've noticed is, people love reading about, this might surprise you, but they love reading about astrophysics and planetary science, believe it or not. Some of our top stories, have been stories that are related to black holes. I don't know why, but people here in this region love reading about black holes. Those stories are often on top. And just to give you perspective, this week we've been writing about COP26. We've been writing about the Expo 2020 that's happening. We've been writing about a range of topics, and to see several space stories actually on the top is quite extraordinary and really tells you the interest that we're getting from audience who are now interested in space. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, why are people interested in black holes here? I actually think that all children are interested in black holes. I've always wondered why. There's no people in there.
I think it really captures the imagination. It goes back to how space reporters have that responsibility to get a higher readership in space stories. And what we've been doing is covering stories that are related to a lot on astrophysics, and people are interested in reading about what's out there, and they're also reading about the human perspective that Stacey mentioned earlier.
Okay, thank you very much. And it's good to see that people are actually interested in astrophysics and the bigger picture of our world. So I'm glad to see that that you're seeing that here in the UAE. Timidayo.
Yeah, so the landscape is kind of like different for us because African countries are now, investing in space exploration or even space flight program. So you can put a face on a mission, for example. So that's a problem. And in fact, so like the biggest stories now are like satellite projects, or like, oh, a new space agency and things like that. But we've tried to like take an unbiased approach to this where we give visibility to all the stories like on equal level. So we don't try to like, write more about, for example, some countries more than the other, or like some kind of project, than the other. So we provide like the same visibility for all of the projects. And then, so we also do like a lot of stories around how these technologies are actually helping people. So the space application side of things, because oftentimes when some African countries launch satellite, for example, the tone of the conversation is like, hey, why are you spending money on this when you've got like other problems to address? So what we've tried to do is to write a lot about how they're actually capitalizing on those technologies to address different problems. And this has actually helped to bridge the gap of information and make more people aware of like daily application of space technologies and how it impacts their lives.
That's an interesting observation, because what you're doing is what is the most difficult thing in the story, at least from my limited European view, where we do have astronauts that get all the attention. Because you don't have that, you have to focus on the other thing. And what I'm thinking is that we could probably learn from you. Is if you're able to bring the benefits of things like Earth observation and all these satellites to the ground in Africa, that's something that, wearing my Earth observation promotion hat that I also have in my professional life, is I can probably learn from you. And well, let's pick this up offline. But thank you for your insights. Let me go to my next question, and that's an important one, especially for the audience, because what I'm looking for really is for my panelists here to give you some ideas on how to best deal with the media. I know many space organizations struggle sometimes with the media, some more than others, but in a variety of ways. And now that we have the opportunity to listen to the space media here on stage, I'm really looking for clues and for tips, perhaps practical tips on how to best deal with the media. So let me ask it this way: what would you wish the space industry, including agencies, companies, and research institutes, would provide more to help the global media better communicate? And I'm going to use that word, despite what you said, Jeff, and promote space activities. Please.
Well, how much time do we have here? I'll be short. Just a couple of things that help. If you are in public relations with a company or organization involved in space, a couple things. One, be proactive rather than just reactive. Reach out to us when you have a story or want to make sure that your point of view is getting heard on a particular issue. Don't just wait for us to contact. Two, when we do contact, please respond. Even if all you have to say is no comment, getting a no comment is rather than just hanging there waiting for you to return my call or email. There is one fairly major company in this industry, I won't name them, they're not here, I still won't name them, that whenever I contact them for comment, I never get a response. I mean, probably 49 times out of 50, I don't get a response from this company, and certainly they're big enough to have the resources to do so. They just choose not to do so. And then, finally, if you are a company or organization, have some, just some nice centralized information about who you are, what you do, who your press contacts are on your website, to make it easy for us when we do want to reach out to you, to be able to reach out to the right person at the right email or phone number. Just sort of, it seems like a very simple, practical thing, but you'd be surprised how often it's difficult to figure out who the point of contact is at a company when I've got a fairly straightforward question and I'm on deadline to get a response.
Yeah, so I guess you're not always looking for Bill Nelson when you contact NASA.
It's always useful to talk to the boss, but sometimes it's very useful just to talk to, and NASA's a particular point, I'll just briefly say, it's such a large organization, there are a lot of different points of contact, and sometimes it takes a little bit of time to figure out exactly who the best person is to talk to. Fortunately, with NASA, most of the time, when I do find that right person, I get a response pretty quickly. But sometimes it takes a little bit of time to figure out who at the right center or division is the right person to talk to.
So thank you very much. And everybody in the audience, think about your website. Do you have a media section on your website with that information? As Jeff said, that is probably one of the very easy things that you can do. Stacy.
I fully agree with Jeff here, because the key between our relationship, and this is a relationship of sorts, is communication. And a lot of the times I cannot communicate to you if you don't want me to communicate with you, because I come to your website, as Jeff said, you go, you scroll, you Control F all of the pages, and you're like, where's the phone? Why is there only an info at spacecompany.com? Please, guys, if you have a company and you want to be written about and you want to be communicated about, please make sure that you can be communicated about, because most of the times I can't. Second of all, please, if you have funding and you are able to do this, and there are people who can't speak or don't have media fright, please make them a spokesperson, because as Jeff said, sometimes it takes hours on LinkedIn to find anyone who will respond, because you're the media and most people can't talk to the media. So please just find one person in the company and allow us to approach them, because believe us, if we don't find the person on your website, we're going to go Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and everywhere else. And trust me, we'll find you. And it's better for us to find you on the website than go into your Instagram, request access, and then be like, okay, I want an interview with you. Don't be afraid of the media, we're quite nice. If you want to be like friendly with us, we're going to be very happy, because we're always looking for stories. So give us those stories. And if you're releasing press releases, please don't think that you have to be boring. They do not have to be boring. They have to be fun. Please think of your work as super exciting, because if you make it sound exciting because you know why it is exciting, I sometimes don't. And I'd have to find that excitement in your work. But it would be easier if you could give that little cherry on top for us sometimes, because we dig hard and we work a lot, but if you help us, we're going to be very grateful. I think that's it. So communications, guys.
Okay, so that media@spacecompany.com account, where actually that person that you're talking about is responding. That would be great. Anyway, let's see what your experiences here are, Sarwat.
Yeah, I agree with my fellow panelists. I think probably the biggest challenge I have experienced is probably being left in the dark, sending a media request and then not even getting a response, and then sometimes getting a response and then the PR person completely disappearing and leaving us wondering what's going on. Also, I would recommend maybe if for example, you are a PR agency representing a space agency, like that is the case here, you probably want to be, if they're not going to provide regular mission updates or comments, then maybe be active on social media and provide regular updates as to what's going on. For example, there are several missions that are ongoing, announced here a couple of years ago, and I still have no idea what's going on. But that's to say, of course, some of the more important missions have been extensively covered and were promoted, as you said, Remco, on social media. And I think that's about it. Probably best having a good relationship with the press. Like Jeff mentioned, if they're not interested in providing a comment, at least say they're not interested in providing a comment, instead of us and our editor waiting for the reporter to come back and say what happened with that story. So no comment works as well. Thank you.
So hang on, Sawat, let me ask you a follow-up question in this relation with the press, and I guess that's most relevant to you, but also to you, Jeff. What do you think of press releases?
Well, I can speak from a UAE perspective. They're quite, they're very technical. They provide an angle that is probably something that, if, for example, some of the new, I don't want to name a news organization, but some news organizations in the Middle East do actually copy paste press releases. They're not changed much. So the problem with that is because the space agency and the space centers are sending out press releases that are so completely, the general public would not understand it. They would not understand some of the technical parts of, and the very specific scientific parts of that mission. No one is reading that story. So I think PR agencies could possibly, I've actually had this discussion because when, for example, the asteroid belt mission was announced, it was a bit of a messy communication with that because I think press was confused. Is it going to Venus? Is it going to the asteroid belt? And what it is that it was an asteroid belt exploration mission with a Venus flyby is what it was. What I've noticed is because there are space reporters here, but not full-time space reporters. There are people that are covering space, part-time. So the challenge that now I'm facing is because I am the only one that's based in the UN that's doing it. I have to go through that press release, and somewhere in the middle of that press release, or probably towards the end, there's a very interesting angle that I could take, and it's probably the most important part of the story. So maybe put that, rediscover, refocus what could possibly be the best way to tell your company, your space agency's story. And you would probably get a lot of exposure for your client that way instead of, taking whatever the space agency tells you and putting very technical stuff on top.
All right, thank you very much, because I know there's a lot of people out there that spend a lot of time writing these press releases. So anyway, we may come back to that in a little bit. I'm curious to hear what you think of that as well, Jeff. But let me give Timidayo the chance to answer this question from his point of view first. So Timidayo, please.
Yeah, so on the issue of building good relationship with the press, I think that's very important, and I also think it's it's important to have someone that you can easily reach. So I'll give you 2 examples. So I think in 2019 on thereabouts, the Rwandan government did some deal with OneWeb that had to do with some satellite projects, communication satellite, and a lot of people were reporting that as a Rwandan satellite, and it wasn't a Rwandan satellite. But then there was also no one in Rwanda to answer the question. And then if you go online now, all the stories are, oh yeah, it was Rwandan satellite, but that's not right. And then something also happened recently where the file API for ITU filing for over 300,000 satellite, and when people were reporting that, they were like, oh, Rwanda want to launch over 300,000 satellites, and that's not accurate. But then the problem too is that they're not also very open with the press. So even though the press is saying this, there is no one to answer the question and clear their hair on what the real issue is. So I think that is also very important.
Again, that's an important point, and again, I hope people here are listening, that not answering is an issue. Because either, as Stacey said, we will trace you down in ways that you may not like, and it takes a lot of time. So it's important that we can reach you and that we can get a quick answer, even if that answer is no comment. So before we go to the questions of the audience, I would like to ask the press release question to you, Jeff, because this is something, again, that the industry spends a lot of time on.
Yeah, I would say from my point of view, the press release can be the start of an article. It's not the article itself. We're not going to take the press release and just post it up on Space News. There are, blogs, sort of sketchy websites out there that do that. But, I look at the press release and it forms the basis of the article. I may follow up with the company or organization to try to get some clarity, try to get some additional information, go reach out to other people for comment, try and put whatever you're announcing in the press release into a broader context to provide some historical background, that all that goes into the story. So the press release can be the trigger for the story, but it's not going to be the story in and of itself.
All right, thank you very much. Well, thank you to my panelists for this round of questions. Now I'd like to open it to the audience, please. So if we can have the Slido up here. I've seen a few very interesting questions already. I can't see it on the screens in front of me. Thank you. So let me see. I'd like to go to the second one. I have a different sequence here, but I looked at the second question, and it kind of relates to what we talked about before, about these very visual billionaires race to space story that we mentioned earlier. And what I'd like to take out of here is the word backlash, because we do see, especially on social media, which happens to be my area of attention, we do see a lot of backlash that these stories contain, that, okay, billionaires going to space, and what about all these other issues that we see on Earth? What can media do to maybe prevent this backlash or inform people in the right way? How do you deal with this, Jeff?
Well, I mean, if you want to change sort of the easy media story and the clickbait and so on, I think ultimately you have to change sort of the business models that support a lot of media that rely on large amounts of traffic and advertising and so on, which drives sort of the clickbaity sort of stories and headlines and so on. And so that is a much broader issue than one facing space. Certainly what we try to do, and I think what everyone else up here tries to do is to, try to provide, factual story, not be sensational, provide the proper context to it. But there are other media outlets that have other motivations and other models that are going to take a different approach to the same story. And again, the billionaire space race being a prime example of that.
Okay, does anyone else want to comment specifically on this?
So for us, what we did is that our business model does not rely on advertising or traffic. So that sort of like give us like the opportunity to write whatever kind of story we want to write, or to give visibility to like the aspect of the industry that doesn't get visibility.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to say, I mean, this is an interesting question. Space tourism and, the conversation around wealthy billionaires going to space. And this is something that's happening, and this isn't something we can ignore. I think space tourism is increasing. It's becoming part of the space sector, so it's not something that we can definitely ignore. Yes, we need to report it very accurately. We don't have to sensationalize it, and we also have to report all of the facts properly, just so it's not something where it looks like we are trying to promote or advertise or you be the PR person for this billionaire going to space. But I don't think it's something that media can ignore now, right, in my opinion.
Okay, well, you kind of jumped to the second question, which I think is good. So let me remove this one and move to that one about sensationalization of news. The key thing here, I think, is the second sentence. How can the people out here, how can the space sector try to correct misinformation as non-reporters? The question that I have when I see that is do we need to do that at all? Or I mean, how do we think about correcting misinformation?
Actually, yes, we have to, because our experience in Africa is, so you see like conventional media platform like BBC, like CNN, Forbes, and the likes write about what's going on in the African space and satellite industry, and it's often misinformation, because and we understand they don't have like the technical experience or like the knowledge about the industry and all of that. And what we've tried to do is, because it's good that they're reporting, about the industry. So we've tried to build a good relationship with them to, like when they so they reach out a lot now for comment and for information to ensure that the information they're putting out is very accurate. So I think that's very important. The second thing is, even for us in the industry, I think when we write, we should simplify like, the technical terms and the jargons and all of that, so that an average person can actually understand what we're talking about.
Okay, and I guess that's a powerful message for all those press release writers out there, is, as you were saying, Sarah, these press releases, and you confirmed that, Jeff, can be highly technical and maybe focusing the wrong things, the non-interesting things to the general audience. So this translation, as you did, this simplifying of the message, such that it's understood by the 90% of people who are not automatically excited about space as we are, understand the message and maybe can relate it to their own lives. So thank you for that. I was going to go to the next question, so I'm going to click that away, because this is one that I think is important for many people out here at IAC, and we see this as a trend. The thousands of new companies, Chris Brofshausen mentioned it, that the number of space startups is growing exponentially, and I used to work for a few of these space startups, for these very small organizations that may have big news from their point of view, but find it really difficult to find media attention for it. So how can space initiatives like startups, research, or even student missions get in contact with the media? And I see that problem myself. I have my nice press release. Who can I send it to? So sometimes we want to share a story, but we need some help. So Stacy.
Thank you. First of all, guys, thanks for trying to reach out to the media. We really appreciate it. Secondly, build up a story. Don't just write, we built a satellite, but give a story to that satellite. 3, don't forget that there is not only traditional media, not only websites, not only newspapers and magazines, but you can go through social media. And today, if you're a young startup, the best way for you to promote yourself is to create your social media platforms and share there. Because there you can tag IAC, IAF, you can do all of the hashtags, and if your imagery and your text are good, the media will come to you themselves, because we're seeking for stories anyways. And if I can, I want to go back to the billionaire question. God, I thank the billionaires for what they've done. Because now everyone wants to be a billionaire, not to buy a Lamborghini, but to go to space. And as long as it does that, I'm really happy. And of course, we can't advertise or do anything, but we also want space to be exciting. And again, the billionaires make space seem more approachable. So go to the billionaires, as long as they give us interviews as well, because we know how they did it and why they do it, and if there's going to be a raffle. Because we're all waiting for that raffle. Thank you.
All right, thank you. That's very important. Now, we do see these startups in other areas of the world as well. So before we close, I would like to hear perhaps a few more comments about how these hundreds and thousands of new startups can get attention. I'm looking at you, Timidayo, because that's certainly the case in Africa.
I think a lot of reporters that I know in the industry, you can easily reach them. For like Jeff, for example, you can easily get Jeff's email on Space News website, for example. So people are actually very approachable. You can, I don't think there's any reporter in like a space media that you can easily get their email on like the news website or something. So just get a bunch of emails and send to like 10 or 15 of them. I'm sure like a few of them will reply, yeah.
All right, thank you. Now, Jeff or Sawat, how do you deal with these maybe smaller news items of these very exciting startups, or very excited people in startups?
Right, well, there's actually a big space startup scene that's happening here. It's developing, so I've had quite a few get in touch with me. Very active on Twitter. My email's there, on our website as well. So, but the thing is, I mean, if you're going to get in touch, and I understand you're trying to tell me about your startup, which is very interesting to see that the sector grow. But if, we would like to have our own sort of interviews and not just use the press release. And we would like to sort of even come and, maybe if it's interesting enough, make a video. And if you could be as, I guess, welcoming to the press, we would be able to, do stories around that. It's very easy to get in touch with the reporters at the National and then the reporters in general, because they're so active on social media, and their contact information, usually their email, is on the website that they're reporting for.
Now, you say something very interesting, and actually I use the same word, if it's interesting. When is it interesting to you?
Well, when it's not a technical press release.
Okay, stop writing technical press releases.
No, it's interesting when For example, there's a mission updates, to be honest, for us has been very interesting because often there's sometimes radio silence, and to get an update as to what's going on with a certain program, that's interesting. If you're a startup that is doing something exciting and would add to the space sector, and it's something that people should read about, that's interesting. So, for example, this week, what we've covered, and I'm going to bring up Blue Origin again, great publicity for them, but they have this local company that they are working with, and we reported this week, and the lady, I guess I don't want to call it a startup, but it's a company, and I think it's relatively new, and she reached out to me on LinkedIn, so that, that's how I think a lot of the people in communication and marketing have been getting in touch with journalists here. And we had no idea, but Blue Origin is coming up with a localization strategy. So that company is helping Blue Origin with their localization strategy. We had no idea. I think that's very interesting. So, I think that answers your question. Just get in touch on social media.
Okay, and make sure your LinkedIn profile is up to date. I heard that as well. For the people out here.
Oh yeah, definitely LinkedIn's important, but Twitter I think nowadays is equally as important.
Yeah. Well, thanks for mentioning that. That's my lifeblood, so thanks for mentioning that. Jeff, I'm really interested in hearing your perspective on when is a story interesting.
Well, first, to reach out to us, spacenews.com, go to the About section, you'll find our staff there, and you can find our contact information. Also, Twitter, Jeff_Faust. In terms of what's interesting, what catches my, what looks like an interesting story, sort of explain what sets you apart. There are, if you've been at some of the other sessions of this conference, you probably heard varying numbers, 100, 150, 200 launch vehicle companies. If you are the 201st launch vehicle company, and you're going to send me a story, you've got a pretty strong uphill battle to go through to get my attention, because it already seems to me like there are too many launch vehicle companies, far more than the most optimistic expectations the market can support. Why are you going to be different? Why are you going to succeed and beat out the 200 other launch vehicle companies out there? It's really sort of explaining what's different about you in terms of your technology or your business model or your market or your funding, whatever it is that makes you unique, that grabs my attention, that can make for an interesting story for our readers to explain that, yes, here's another launch vehicle company, but this one is different because of whatever. So that's, it's really being able to, concisely explain why you're different, why you get my attention, and then I'll start reading more and maybe get back in touch with you. I know I get pitched, far more stories than I could ever possibly write. So if I don't get back, it's probably because I'm swamped with a bunch of other stuff. But, to really maximize your chances out there, think about whatever it is with your company, your organization, your student project. What is it about it that really makes it stand out, that really makes it different, makes it important out there? And if you can communicate that to us, we can communicate that to our readers and our viewers.
I really like that answer, and I'm going to go to you, Stacey, for the last answer. But as a tip for all those startups, that's exactly how you pitch to your investors. The story is not very different pitching to your investors and pitching to journalists, in that sense that you have to show your uniqueness. So take these tips into consideration. Stacey, I'm going to give you the last answer before we close.
Thank you, guys. There are two very important things to pitching, apart from the text and the idea. It's videos or photos, and those should be good. Because if you have great content and if you have great visuals, that will attract the attraction of the it will attract the audience, sorry. Please make sure that you make nice pictures of yourself, of your team, of your product. It's super important. And two, we like exclusive content. If you have exclusive content just for us, I'm pretty sure if you say exclusive launcher contact photos, videos, maybe not in that order, and you send it to Jeff, that at least will stand out in the email. So if you say exclusive video, interview, whatever, full access, only for you, we'll read it, and there's a better chance we're going to publish about it. So always think that we have a lot of stories coming to you, and you need to stand out. And if you make that little effort for us to make you more approachable and hotter and sexier, you're going to be on the news, guys.
All right, thank you very much. And on that high and on that long list of tips, and I've always learned that people can only take away 3 thoughts from a session, and I think we've seen way more than 3 thoughts, so I hope you've taken notes. I'm going to say this session will be published on YouTube in a few weeks, so all the GNF sessions and most of the plenaries will be published by IAF in a few weeks for you to review. So if you have missed a few statements, then you can refer back to YouTube. So I would like to thank my panelists for taking the courage of coming out of the dark corner, being in the spotlight, and really showing the industry how to deal with us. And as you can see, we're really not that scary. We're really open to get in touch with you. So thank you very much, Jeff, Stacy, Sarwat, Timidayo, for sharing these insights with us. Thank you very much to my audience for being here at this very difficult moment in the conference, but I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to this, what I think is a very important story, and a story that can really help the space sector profile itself and make sure that we remain as visible as we deserve to be. So with that, I'm going to wish you a very good continuation or end of the conference, and I hope to see you all again in Paris, where hopefully we'll be able to give you some new and more insights of how to deal with the media. Thank you very much.